Chapter 22. Vanya slowly opened his eyes to see Katyusha sitting beside him in the cramped gunner's compartment. "Vanya!" sobbed Katyusha. "You're alive! Thank God you're alive!" "Katyusha!" whispered Vanya, placing a hand on her before pulling her close to him. "What happened?" asked Vanya as he held on to Katyusha. "They got us, Vanya. Mikhail's gone. Bordov's gone. It's just us," she answered, breathing heavily as she did so. "What about the enemies?" asked Vanya as he tried to understand the situation they were in. "They've moved past us. In the attack, the commander's hatch was sealed shut, and yours is also stuck. But they checked the other compartments. I heard them when they opened the hatches, and... They finished them off, huh?" said Vanya, to which Katyusha nodded. "So we're stuck in here, then," whispered Vanya as he felt the overwhelming heat of the small compartment and imagined just how cold it must have been outside. "Yeah," replied Katyusha. "Does the radio work?" "No." "Can't even listen to the weather report," Vanya joked. "Well, you can always listen to me sing for you," replied Katyusha, trying to calm herself and Vanya. "I'd like that," said Vanya as he turned to Katyusha and kissed her. Katyusha sang to him as the two sat together in Vanya's seat. When she finished, Vanya didn't say anything until he felt Katyusha messing with his coat. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm fixing your pin," she replied. "Katyusha," whispered Vanya. "Yes?" she asked, not stopping from her task. "We've had a pretty nice life together, haven't we?" said Vanya. Katyusha stopped for a moment. "We've only been together for a year," she replied as she forced herself to go back to fixing Vanya's coat in order to occupy her mind. "We still have much time ahead of us." "It was a pretty good year," replied Vanya, avoiding Katyusha's deflection. "It was. We had our ups and downs, but I really enjoyed every moment with you," replied Katyusha as a lump began forming in her throat. She felt ill, as if she was starting to realize her own mortality, but fighting against that realization. Vanya stroked Katyusha's cheek and smiled as she gave him another tender kiss. The two took off their coats so they could feel each other's warmth. If it was going to be hot, it may as well be from the other's body heat, rather than the coats. "What should we name the baby?" asked Vanya weakly. "We don't even know the gender yet," said Katyusha, a few tears forming at her eyes. "I know, but we will soon. Quite soon," whispered Vanya as he looked to Katyusha. Katyusha's eyes met his and she could see the feeling in him, and she felt it too. They knew their life was close to its end. "Very soon," said Katyusha as she placed a hand on her belly, allowing her tears to come more freely now. "Very soon," replied Vanya, placing a hand over hers and pulling her in tight. "Maybe we'll even get to show Nona when we find out," whispered Katyusha. "And I'll be able to show you and the baby to Virni. I bet she'll like you. You'll like her," said Vanya as he closed his eyes and planted his face into Katyusha's hair, and the two allowed themselves to simply enjoy their love's intimacy. It was quiet as the planes flew over. Not even their payloads made noise as they fell. Though blown by the wind, the warheads fell over the oncoming rebel forces with indifference. From up there, the pilots only saw the wreckage of a tank as they flew over. They had no idea what was happening inside. They had no idea the valiant soldiers who had lost their lives within, nor all the lives saved by the men and women inside of that tank. But in the end, it was because of the great sacrifices of these two lovers that countless men and women could live another day, could have another chance to make it through life and become better as people. Their lives, the life Katyusha and Vanya led together, to their end, showed that it is never too late to redeem oneself. The woman standing beside the statue of Vanya and Katyusha together said as she concluded her presentation. "And now, we may go along to the next statue in our Fallen Heroes exhibit. This one was donated by an anonymous donor, and they did so to tell the story of a woman named Nona. You may remember we talked about her in the last story, as she was a good friend of Katyusha. A tall man sat with a shorter woman who sat close by his side. They were older, somewhat grayed in their age now, and nothing like themselves of their past. Sort of. They still loved each other. They still had the same values instilled by the lessons of their lives past, but nobody would recognize them, upon first look, as the two lives they had left behind. Quietly, they watched the presenter who stood away from them, telling her stories to the crowd. A boy from within the crowd raised his hand and asked, "Miss Alexander, did you ever know Nona?" "No, I'm afraid I never got to meet her. Remember, she died early into the war. I was born near the end." "But what about Katyusha and Vanya?" The presenter smiled but simply stated, "I don't know. Legend has it to this day they're still alive, out enjoying their lives, taking their well-deserved break from being heroes." The man and his wife, who sat together watching from afar, got up and walked out of the courtyard filled with statues and monuments to the men and women who had lost their lives to the war. Their nation had finally learned to remember the past and never to repeat it. "Excuse me," called a young girl to the two leaving the venue. "Ma'am, you forgot your flower." "Oh," said the short woman as she walked towards the girl. "Thank you, dear. That's a very pretty flower. What is it?" asked the girl. "Chamomile, my favorite flower." "I really like it," replied the girl. The girl turned as her mother called to her. "Go ahead and keep it. I have many more in my garden," replied the woman with a smile. "Really? Thank you," replied the girl. "Miss Katyusha," replied the woman. "Now go along. Go back to your mother. I know she loves you very much, as do all mothers love their children." "Thank you, Miss Katyusha," replied the girl as she left the man and woman alone. The woman placed her hand on her lover's arm and sighed. "Wish we could have had a family like that?" he asked. She nodded. "I wish we could have raised her like a normal child. But at least our daughter can live a life of peace and prosperity, and at least we can always come here to see her." The woman considered how she had been made to leave her daughter for many years as herself and her husband went into hiding. Only in the last few years had she gotten the chance to know her own kin. "And at least, in all of this, we may have each other," replied the man as they walked beneath the trees. "Wherever life takes us, so long as we have love, we will always find a way." "Till death do us part," she said, nestling her head in his arm. "Not even death can bring us apart. Forever and always I shall be with you," he replied as he leaned over and kissed the top of her head. "Thank you, Vanya," she sighed with a smile, as the two went along walking in peace. "I love you. I love you too, my dearest Katyusha."